Hi everyone, welcome back to Pine Hollow Auto Diagnostics. Yep, this is the Beached Whale parking spot, and today we have a 2004 Volvo XC something. Oh, what is this thing? XC70 all-wheel drive, turbocharged. It was towed from Virginia on a flatbed, and they just dumped it here last night. I got to leave on a trip, but we're going to do a preliminary, just take a look at it, see what we're dealing with. Customer complaint was, let's see here, description: cranks won't start, car lost power, then stopped running. Cranks, the two mechanics checked gas, pressure, and fire unplugs and knows nowhere to go. From there, the last says the info has been erased. I found your fuel pump control module for 2005 Volvo. Crank won't start. Video very similar. Here's how the car showed up. The intake pipe is not even attached to anything. I don't know where the mass airflow sensor is. We got some wiring, baked wiring harnesses. I'm just going to stuff this in here temporarily. Anyways, I think there's some parts inside. Now here's the mass airflow sensor with the airbox cover. We'll put that back on. Battery was pretty spanked. We got the TOPDON Tornado 90,000 pumping out the amps. It's already put in 30 amp hours. It's been here for about an hour. So let's put some stuff back under the hood, scan it for codes, see what this thing does. Alright, we got a full health report. This car has 278,000 miles. That's pretty impressive. These Volvos, like I said, they can keep going for a long time. Okay, CM, we got a whole bunch of stuff. No count with TCM, interesting. Don't really care. Passenger door module, driver's door module. ECM, camshaft position sensor, intake exhaust. Camshaft reset valve, not sure what that is. But again, let's start from scratch. Clear them all out. Crank this thing over, see what it does. Alright, here we go. So, key off. Let it go to sleep. Key on. I did check the oil level, that's fine. Oh, that doesn't sound good. That sounds like a timing problem. Ooh, and then it went poof right through the intake. Okay, let's see if the ECM set any codes. Doesn't sound good. Timing belt's on there. No DTC set. I'm sure we have fuel and spark. Yeah, so right off the bat, I want to tear off the timing covers, and we'll do this later. Check the timing. We can put in an in-cylinder pressure transducer, just do a quick crank compression test on one cylinder, see what that looks like. It'll definitely tell us if the timing's out. It doesn't sound like anything's hit anything, but you never know. Okay, so here's one of the most efficient, effective tests you can do early on in the diagnosis to verify approximate engine mechanical timing and ignition timing. 2-channel scope, and I just have the ignition coil pulled out in cylinder number 1. We've got our pressure hose, PHAD pressure transducer, and then on the control wire of the coil, no piercing probes required. We just have channel 2. That's the red trace. So let's crank it over, see what happens. I assume we'll see something interesting. All right, here we go. Oh yeah, just as I suspected, we have a little bit of compression. Look at that, boom. And where's that spark occurring? Nowhere near TDC. So right away, in 1 hour of diagnostics, you can tell your customer we're dealing with an engine-based timing problem. This is a timing belt engine. Shouldn't be hard to verify timing marks, but you can't guarantee that valves weren't bent or something else. Also ask the customer, what's the history? He said it was just running and then it stopped running. How did it jump time? The tensioners on these things are mechanical, they're not hydraulic, so who knows? But we see that the engine is spinning over, it is sealing, but right here, we're dropping into vacuum, and then boop, the valve is opening. Here it almost looks like you're starting to pull again, then another valve is opening, and then you finally hit compression. So I'm going to save this waveform, and then we'll come back to it in a few days and hopefully finish this up. By the way, we did set some trouble codes. Ignition coil cylinder 2 signal. Okay. We have camshaft position sensor intake, camshaft position sensor exhaust. And let me show you under the hood how someone's tried to solve this problem. So let me show you guys why sometimes this job is frustrating. So this car obviously has a timing problem. We figured that out in what, 15-20 minutes. Now what did the other guys do? This car is being butchered. I mean, the camshaft sensor's all loose. That's not OEM. I'm sure the one back there isn't. All this stuff is loose. Wires are a mess. We see Dorman oil control solenoids on here. It's just... So, hopefully the customer will get lucky. We can reset the timing and the car will run. But will it run well? Unlikely with all these junk aftermarket parts from the parts cannon. That's one of the most frustrating things, is I feel bad for the car. I feel bad for the owner. You have to pay for someone to butcher his car. It's ridiculous. Don't do this, people. If the mechanic doesn't know what they're doing, don't keep paying money to keep butchering your car. So we'll be back on this thing. Hopefully we'll get it running. Oh, and by the way, remember the code set for coil number 2? Well, I unplugged coil number 1, but you can see this wiring harness, it's not in its home location. It's just stretched out here, and they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It seems logical, right? But no, on Volvos, the wiring harness is routed very specifically. Like the one we just did with the burnt exhaust valve. Those coils, it's not like this wire goes here. It could loop around and come back to the next coil. So I'm sure these coils are all plugged in wrong. Can we go by the wiring colors? Oh, I don't know. This one's a brown. This one is also brown. Like, are they all brown? Volvo doesn't make it easy because these are power and ground. Yeah, I think they're all brown. Dang it. So, anyways, that's where we are. That's a bummer. Oh, I keep noticing more mistakes. So this hose is supposed to go to this pipe, but for some reason this ignition coil connector is right over that hole. You know why? Because it's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be rotated around. They thought all the coils went like this. That's completely and utterly wrong. Someone who doesn't know what the hell they're doing is working on this car. Ah, this is so frustrating. I'm sure this is the pigtail for number 1. This coil is supposed to be rotated around, so this hole is right here. And then you can put the hose back on where it's supposed to be. What a freaking mess. He's up the steer now. Straighten it out. Well, we got the Volvo XC70 in the garage finally, and well, I have to reset this timing. We know the timing's off just from the pressure transducer waveform. Like I said, this car is butchered. It's even worse than I thought. Popped off the big stabilizer bar over there, and like this cam sensor, it's not even in the right place. Obviously this doesn't belong here. They left all the fasteners out. And even the crank pulley main nut is missing, so I can't even spin the crankshaft over to set the timing. This is a royal pain in the ass. I might have to call the other shop and ask them, do you guys have the remaining fasteners so I can put this thing back together? This is criminal to do this to a customer's car, not put it back together, charge them money, and they're way worse off than they started with. The customer told me they actually had the cylinder head off. That made me cringe, because if they can't plug the ignition coils back in right, how are they going to install a cylinder head correctly? This is, not an easy job. They probably forgot all the exhaust manifold gaskets. Those are a real pain to install. It's just cringeworthy. I mean, I'm sure nothing here is tight. Like, look, this cam bolt is completely loose, and the engine was turned over like this. Ridiculous. Alright, so I'm doing some calculations here on in-cylinder waveforms to see how far off this timing belt is. And I actually have a known good waveform from the exact same engine off of a 2008 Volvo S60 that swallowed the PCV valve. This is a known good from cylinder number 2, undamaged cylinder. So put our rulers in. I want to know, when does the intake valve close and when does the exhaust valve open? Those you can see on the waveform. So the difference between bottom dead center here before the compression stroke and where the pressure starts to rise is about 75 degrees. On this waveform from the broken car, from 540 to where the pressure starts to rise is about 110 degrees. And if we put the ruler where it's supposed to rise, about 75, you can see the delay is about 35 degrees. Okay, so write that down. So intake retarded about 35 degrees. What about the exhaust? Let's go back to the good car. You can see this little rise happens right at about 180. So that's bottom dead center after compression. On this one, put a ruler here. This rise happens later by about like 30 degrees. We can say, if this scale right about there, let's say about 30 degrees. So exhaust around 30 degrees. Then you can go to the car and measure the number of teeth between these two reference marks on the cams. Are the cams cam to cam timing is that good? So let's count the number of teeth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 18 teeth. And so is 18 teeth cam to cam a good number? Yes, I know that for a fact because on the old belt from the S60 where I marked it, it's definitely 18 teeth exhaust to intake. So that's good. We're off by about 30 to 35 degrees, and if we count the number of teeth on the cam sprocket, it's 42 teeth. Now, one revolution of the cam is 720 of the crank, so 720 divided by 42, 17.1 degrees per tooth. That's pretty close. That's about 2 teeth right there. So I think this timing belt is 2 degrees retarded at the crank. Cam to cam is fine. So I put the engine at TDC just using the screwdriver method, and I managed to turn the crank pulley over by putting a kind of a long socket with a pry bar and just spun it over, and that little dowel is pretty much at the top. So this mark should be right here. This mark should be right here at the top. So we can reset the timing belt, and then we have to reattach these cam sensors. These are important. They can't just be wobbling around like this. This one's completely messed up, so I'm going to have to take off this bracket, see what the heck they did there. And then we're going to have to plug the ignition coils back in correctly. Remember, they were all facing this way. Well, I have a picture from the S60 where these two coils, actually the connector faces that way, and the wiring harness comes through here. This one faces this way, this one faces that way, number one faces again towards the front of the vehicle. So we've got some work to do. Pop this timing belt off and just spin the cams 2 teeth forward, lock those in place, and hopefully we'll at least have a known good compression waveform. Now I can't get this car's probably a long ways from running correctly, but at least if we get the timing right and we get the cam sensors on, get the ignition coils figured out, it has a chance of starting up and running. Alright, so first thing, let's tighten all these sprocket bolts down to avoid turning the sprocket on the cam. See, that one's tight. Why wouldn't they tighten all of them down? That one's tight too. That one's... I just don't understand. That one's tight. I'll get a shorter socket for that. And then we'll loosen the big tensioner bolt there. We'll see if enough slack to jump some teeth. Alright, so let's loosen up the tensioner bolt. Should be enough. Now there's a hex holder in there. So it's an eccentric sprocket, or pulley. So we can get as much slack here as possible without actually taking that pulley off. Now, so we want to advance these cams, correct? Let's see, if I just turn this cam forward, will the belt jump on the crank? Well, the there's one. We need one more. Two. Okay. Now that's there. That's there. Let's make sure it's 18. So now we're right here. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. That guy's right there. Oh, I jumped the cam on the belt, not around the crank. Dang it. Maybe we can turn this one too and see if that one will jump to 2 teeth forward. Alright, here we go. So I just got a 10mm wrench around the, I think it's a 50 Torx. One more, 2. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that. Should be 100% here. So from this mark, we're 1, 2 forward, and from this mark, we're 1, 2 forward. So I think that should be happy right there. Now what we can do is tighten up the belt and just energize the starter with an in-cylinder pressure transducer. Make sure our waveform is close enough. Alright, here we go. Pressure transducer is on, just one channel, 265 PSI. Transducer, we're at 0. All we have to do is plug in these two and just spin it over. Okay, any difference? Let's compare. Alright, let's take a look at the waveform. I'll say right now, this does look promising. So, try to get the glare out of the way. Let's see, what if we increase the brightness? So, put our rulers in. Our peak pressure is about 60 psi. The intake valve right here is closing about 75 to 80 degrees after BDC. That's good. And our exhaust valve is opening right here, right across the 180 marker. So we're back 34 degrees advanced on the cams in the correct spot. Now you might ask, what's up with this huge vacuum pocket that's going down to minus 9 psi. Well, keep in mind, this engine has been cranked for almost a year with injectors spraying, so the cylinders are washed down. That's why we're losing a lot of, mixture during the compression stroke. So I'm not too worried about that. I just want the exhaust and the intake valve timing to be spot on the money. So now that the timing, I'm happy with the timing now, with the mechanical timing. Now we have to clean up the ignition coil wiring harness mess and these cam sensor caps mess. So let me try to get this plate off and reposition this guy, see why it's not aligning with the hole right here. I don't know if they put an F on there, so that must be the forward one. But yeah, let me figure this mess out, and there's a chance this car might start and run today. Oh, by the way, the peak compression before we reset the time was about 40 psi. So we gained 20 psi on peak compression and moved the valve opening and closing times to specification. So that was 2 teeth off.